Coming up on today's show, we're going to break down all the latest roster moves and injury news as Jalen Virgil has been placed on injured reserve and Denver signed another wide receiver. And then we're going to break down an interesting report I saw about the Broncos potentially trading for a kicker. So all that and more coming up on today's show. I'm still trying to kick this cold, so I'm sorry for the nasally voice. But before we get into the latest roster moves, this is why you subscribe, because never miss a single piece of Broncos news or rumors when you are subbed to the channel. And for my own selfish reasons, I'm trying to get to 14,800 subscribers, and I need 39 people watching right now to consider subscribing for absolutely nothing. Now, the Jalen Virgil news is not good news, unfortunately. Denver placed the former App State UDFA on injured reserve, and that ends his 2023 season with the Denver Broncos. The only way he can play is if the Broncos reach an injury settlement with him, but that's likely not going to happen. I'm sure Denver wants to keep him on injured reserve to hold him over until 2024. But it's a bummer because he went down after a big play against the 49ers, a 50-yard grab, and it resulted in a torn meniscus, which he has to get surgery on to repair. Initially, there was some optimism that he might be ready to roll maybe a couple of weeks or even some months into the season, but ultimately Denver decides to put him on injured reserve. They only really had two options. Put him on IR, which ends his season right now, or carry him through roster cutdown days and then put him on IR afterwards, but he would have to get through the roster cutdown days, which means you'd have to waive someone else and hope that they would not be claimed by another team. So when we look at this wide receiver depth chart really quickly, it's starting to get thin, right? You no longer have Tim Patrick. You are out Jalen Virgil. Those were two guys I would say were pretty, Tim Patrick for sure, but Jalen Virgil, pretty comfortable, say, a roster lock for 2023. So of the six guys you kind of had penciled in as your wide receivers for this season, you are already down a third of your expected room. But I do wonder if this kind of opens a path for some other players towards the bottom of the depth chart to maybe start climbing their way up, like Montrell Washington. I don't know what the future is with Montrell Washington in Denver. Could he even be out after this season? Because the Jalen Virgil injury definitely opens up a spot for someone else on the roster, or at least heats up competition. But we're talking about just a fifth-round pick from last year who largely has been ineffective in the preseason and the training camp portions that we have seen. He has made some nice plays for sure. He's looked better than he did last year, but he doesn't look like someone I put a gun to my head and say he is for sure a roster lock. Now, a replacement not on the actual 53-man roster, but on the 90-man roster for Jalen Virgil is wide receiver Josh Hammond. So Mike Klis reported that the Broncos signed Josh Hammond following Jalen Virgil's knee injury. And we'll give you some background information on Josh Hammond. There's not a ton out there. He's relatively new and inexperienced. But here's what we got for notes on him. Basically his Wikipedia, if you will. He was a UDFA in 2020 coming out of Florida. He initially went to the Jags, did not make their initial 53-man roster, but he did find a home on their practice squad. He came back for another year in Jacksonville. There he eventually was elevated to the 53-man roster, but he's got no real regular season experience. He had practice squad stints with the Jags, the Eagles, and the Patriots. And last year, or I guess this year, he was with the XFL DC Defenders. I think this is just a camp body for preseason week 3. You need to have some wide receivers out there in the fourth quarter. You're not going to put Sutton, Judy, or Mims in harm's way towards the end of the game. So that probably means you have Josh Hammond to round out the rest of the game against the Rams. Speaking of the rest of the game, or just the wide receiver room in general, I do have some good news on Brandon Johnson, who we saw as wide receiver 4 on the depth chart, and that's probably where he is right now. He did return to practice, which is very encouraging to see. He went down with an ankle injury about a week to 10 days ago, so very excited to see him come back, especially in the wake of the Jalen Virgil injury news. But let me know, should the Broncos add another wide receiver? Surface level, like Denver's very top heavy in the wide receiver room, right? Mims, Judy, and Sutton are all three very reliable, dependable. I mean, we don't know about Mims for sure, but I've got high expectations for the former Sooner. But I will say the Broncos are one injury away, one bad snap away from a very thin wide receiver room, right? Knock on wood, But we have seen Jerry Jeudy miss time. We have seen Courtland Sutton miss time. Just going to say, if Week 6 rolls around and your wide receiver room is composed of Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Brandon Johnson, and Kendall Hinton, that's not a very deep wide receiver room. So I would not be shocked if Denver makes a move for a wide receiver. I don't think you can anticipate a big-time move. They're not going to go and trade for someone or make an expensive free agent signing, if that's even a thing anymore in August. But maybe when roster cutdown day comes about, they might look at some of the other receivers waived and go, hey, that guy who was waived in New England or Arizona or wherever, he's better than our wide receiver 6. Let's go claim him. Now, next up on the show, I do want to talk about the potential trade for a kicker, because this was floated out there by someone who's relatively in the know in the NFL, so I thought we could break it down on the show. Because Peter King from NBC Sports recently wrote, GM Mickey Loomis may be able to trade the loser of Wil Lutz and Blake Group, free agent from Notre Dame, for a 6th-round pick just before roster cutdown. Wouldn't be surprised to see Sean Payton show interest in Lutz in Denver. Now, some stats on Wil Lutz before I give you my 2 cents on all of this. As a career, he's had a very successful career, nearly 85 field goal percentage. But last year was his worst year of his NFL career. His field goal percentage dropped 10 points compared to his overall career. So this would not be a good time to buy into the Wil Lutz stock unless you think he's going to have a bounce-back year and Sean Payton is the glue to Wil Lutz, and because Sean Payton wasn't there last year, that's why Wil Lutz went down. I have a hard time believing that. Head coaches and kickers, I don't think there's a big correlation between the two in terms of how good a coach is and what the kicker's field goal percentage is. You either make your kicks or you don't make your kicks. Now, before we get to the rest of the Wil Lutz conversation and my take on all of it, I want to quickly tell everyone about an awesome combo going on with our friends over at Fanatics. Chatsports.com/DEN combo. You get this hat and t-shirt, both on sale. You get 2 things on sale. Do you want to lose money? Because that's basically what you're doing if you don't get the hat and t-shirt combo. But the link, seriously, is in the comments and the description of today's show. So if you want to up your Broncos wardrobe, you can get a 2-for-1 special right now by using the link at the bottom of the screen. Now, when it comes to trading for anyone, if you guys have watched our shows before, you know how I like to operate. Let's look and talk about what draft picks they have, because they don't even have a 6th-rounder to give away, actually. They have 2 7ths and 2 5ths. So 7 picks altogether in 2024. They finally get a 1st-round pick back. They have 1/3. They traded 1/3 away to move up and get Riley Moss. But my 2 cents is you want me to buy in on giving up a draft pick for a kicker coming off his worst season. Why not just keep Maher in the 6th, which you don't even have a 6th, but keep Maher in your 5th or a 7th or whatever it is, because I don't know if this is the right time to buy in on the Wil Lutz stock. Plus, he spells his name with just 1 L. I don't know if you can trust a guy who has 1 L in the name Will. That's just cop shit to me. So no, I'm going to stick with Brett Maher. But hey, I want to get your thoughts on this. If this was the trade that came across your desk and you're Sean Payton or you're George Payton, would you ultimately do this trade? Type T for trade, type P for pass in the comment section. I'm going to pass. I would rather stick with Maher and a draft pick. Wil Lutz has had a lot of good years in his career, but so has Brett Maher. Brett Maher is coming off his best season, arguably, minus the postseason. But for Denver, let's make the postseason first before we start worrying about whether or not you have a good postseason kicker. Now, as always, we wrap up the show with our summer hot takes. It is a scorcher once again in Denver, 95 degrees. So our first take hot take coming up here. And my first take hot take is a little bit of prisoner of the moment here. Some recency bias involved. But Sam Howell, he might be him. He has looked really good in the preseason. I know this has nothing to do with the Broncos, but it's fun to just look at the league as a whole. And Sam Howell, I did not have high expectations for. And I wonder if he is going to just put Washington fans back in the depths of football hell, where they won't be the worst team in football to get Caleb Williams, but they'll be like the 6 through 9 pick in football, right? 6 to 8 wins or so. So they just miss out on a franchise quarterback like Drake May, another UNC legend, or Caleb Williams. But Sam Howell, I'm just going to put this out there, he might be him.